this isn't typical, there's something wrong. And that's where that self-empowerment, self-advocacy piece comes in, because to get there, you have to go through the gamut of learning and connecting with people and entities. They're going to help you be able to do that self-advocacy and figure out, is this something of the norm or is this not the norm?
Cue music. Places, everybody, places. We're starting in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. I've brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted.
Thank you for joining us here on the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Saylor. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Join the Autoimmune Hour's Courage Club. Sign up now at understandingautoimmune.com. Now, back to your host, Sharon Saylor.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and I'm so excited to be here with you on another brand new episode. And I'm going to apologize early for the lighting. I'm not in our home studio. I'm out on the road, but I had the opportunity to talk to someone I'm a huge fan of, Kristal Kent. She's here with us again tonight. She's an Army vet living with fibromyalgia. You might remember her story, but after being medically discharged due to injuries, she stayed on with her Army unit, volunteering as a family readiness group leader, which morphed into a supportive extension for both soldiers and their families, and from adult advocacy coordinating roles. And that's where she's taken her life into advocating for others and herself. It's just awesome to hear how much she gets out there and really builds awareness and starts a community consciousness about people living with a variety of invisible illnesses. And so welcome, Kristal. Thanks for being on the show. It's so good to see you again.
Likewise, thank you for having me again. I always enjoy being able to connect and catch up with you.
Yes, and I think we have to give everybody fair warning that we run down rabbit holes, okay? You'll never know what we're going to get when Kristal and I chat, but I'm really excited. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with you with fibromyalgia was that oftentimes it's misunderstood how to categorize it. Sometimes people call it an autoimmune, other times people call it neuro. So why not come to Kristal, who really does her research on this kind of stuff? How would you talk about fibromyalgia if someone said, what is it?
I actually wouldn't talk about it because I keep a neutral opinion, and that's due to what research is out there or lack thereof. What we do know is, so when you look at tax-funded health-centric entities like the CDC or the National Institutes of Health, the National Institutes or NIH, for example, like they have us housed under like the neurological umbrella there. So think of it as medical conditions that are similar under a particular subpoint, in this case neurological, and it's housed under there, but we've been not assigned like a room. So we're kind of in the lobby. So they know it's neurological in nature, and there's a lot of intricacies and fascinating things happening in the central nervous system, like the glial cells have neural inflammation in our brain, and in our brain, the pain centers are lit up like a broken 24-hour, drive-in diner sign. So we know that its etiology is neurological. What we don't know is the subtype. And what I mean is it could be an autoimmune neurological condition, kind of like MS, which is an autoimmune disease that is in effect affecting and attacking parts of the central nervous system. Or it could be a neurological disorder, like along the lines of epilepsy or migraine disorder, where there's some type of disruption that's going between like the brain and the body through the middle messenger of the spinal cord. And then it could be a degenerative medical condition, a neurodegenerative along the lines of Parkinson's. And what happens is there's really a lack of specific driven research that's targeted to kind of pinpoint what type of neurological subtype medical condition fibromyalgia is. So we do know neurological in nature. What kind of neurological? That is where the question lays. So what research is out there, and not, I'm based in the United States, so not just in the US, but in other countries, we see research come in that supports each subtype of a neurological medical condition. And so we're kind of like, the jury's out. So that's one of the reasons why I do the advocacy I do, whether it's advocating more funding is appropriated through these tax-funded entities like the NIH or private entities to do more targeted research, because without knowing the root cause or that pinpoint of this is where it starts in the neurological system, in the long run, any treatments that are developed are more likely than not going to be as effective versus if we did know that starting point in the central nervous system with fibromyalgia. So my personal opinion is the jury's out, but this is what we do know, and this is what we need. We know it's neurological. We need more specific driven research to pin it all down.
And that's part of what you are so brave and strong, and just I admire your advocacy for getting out there and building awareness. Now, I know this month of May is Fibromyalgia Awareness Month, as well as many other awareness conditions. But talk a little bit about your journey through fibromyalgia, because oftentimes I hear from people, and this is going back decades, when it really wasn't taken seriously at first, when it began to hit on people's radar.
The unfortunate thing is, especially in different areas of the world, but still in the US, it's not taken as seriously. We are seeing that narrative change a little bit, but for myself, it's a little bit convoluted. But I actually wasn't officially diagnosed until 2014. However, I was fortunate enough, because I live outside of Cleveland, Ohio, so I have access to many healthcare systems that are world renowned. And I was able to access specialists. And I ended up seeing a rheumatologist, a pain management doctor, and a neurologist, all separate from each other. And when they went through my timeline of symptoms and history of these weird nuances, like these weird medical nuances, like would crop up. Like I'd have these weird things happen medically, and then it would go away. And it really, what it was fibromyalgia flaring up and kind of, in a sense, calming back down. What these three specialists, independent of each other, traced my symptoms going all the way back to August of 2000 when I was still in the military. And those symptoms started subsequently after a military truck that I was in crashed in a ditch. And there was some things, because I ended up being hospitalized because my leg was all swollen. It was like, they're like, oh, we think you have a blood clot. And I'm like, from a car accident? Like, what? And even in the hospital, I was saying like, oh man, my stomach just is killing me. Or I just am having like these minute headaches. Or I'd have like a migraine that would come on real fast and kind of fade out, and just these symptoms that really weren't correlated with what happened in this military truck accident. And so when they all looked at that timeline, it was 14 years before I was officially diagnosed.
Wow.
And the sad thing is, it's a little bit better now. In 2024, some people are not having to wait 14, 15, 20 years, but there's still a long time frame. And in average, and again, this is an average, it's not individualized to everyone's personal experience with fibromyalgia or any other chronic illness for that matter, but we're looking at an average of a 3 to 5 year kind of turnaround of when a person is starting that journey of figuring out what's wrong with them and getting that formal diagnosis of fibromyalgia.
It reminds me so much of my own journey in a way, but I don't have fibromyalgia. I've been diagnosed with autoimmune conditions. And what's fascinating to me is I call it medical whack-a-mole, where the symptom could be quite severe for a fleeting moment of time or a little bit longer of time. And it's almost like when my car rattles and I take it into the mechanic and I say it's rattling, and they take it for a test drive and they go, I don't hear a rattle. It was I almost feel that way about some symptoms that pop up, stay, come and go, aren't there constantly. They consistently show up or something like that. They can be really frustrating, I know, from a patient perspective, but also from a clinician's perspective, because in their mind, they must be checking off hundreds, if not thousands of things it could be as they're trying to work their way down to the final diagnosis.
Right. And this is why self-advocacy as a patient is so imperative, but also self-education. So for myself, there's times where, to give a little bit of a backdrop here, so like since Christmas, I've been sick. This is one of the fun things about having a chronic illness. It's like when you get sick with something communicable, like a cold or the flu, it lingers in us for a long time. I contracted RSV, and then I developed an ear infection. Then I developed a UTI, and then pneumonia, 3 bouts of pneumonia. And I'm still a little bit under the weather. And it's been, 5 months. When I'm in those states, though, a lot of times when I advocate, because sometimes I'll come in and I'll present as mild. And I'm like, sure, because I'm used to being sick and I can function sort of compared to someone who's never had pneumonia or RSV. So I'll come in and I'll present probably to a provider as having mild to moderate symptoms, but I know it's severe. It's just one of those things you build a tolerance. I'm like, look, I don't come to the doctor for these type of things. Like I try not to come because I already see so many doctors. But the other thing is when I have to go to ER or urgent care, I'm setting myself up to be exposed to other illnesses too. So there is a safety reason why I don't go unless if I have to go. But in those moments too, there's times because I also have a couple of autoimmune conditions that tend to be silent. And then a lot of times, like when I'm sick with pneumonia or something, my autoimmune antibodies will flare up for other things. And I'll say, hey, can you run a panel while I'm here? Because I am diagnosed with AS, which is ankylosing spondylitis, and EDS, which I can never pronounce, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
I'm not as knowledgeable and, articulate as some people think I am. But those are times where I know that those antibodies or like ANAs will be really flared up. So I'll ask them just so I can get on the record and I'll explain. I said, I'm such an anomaly. And whenever, especially being a veteran, and I go to veteran affair healthcare system, I'm like seeing a new doctor every 6 months. I said, this is just tangibility because they don't ever catch it in the moment. But when I'm sick like this, it all flares up. And then they're like, okay. And I'm like, I'm paying for it. So or my insurance, whatever. So that's one of the interesting things too with invisible illnesses is that there's just times it doesn't show up. Right. But when I have a whole bunch of stuff going on all at once and everything, it's like popping off like fireworks. And then they're figuring out, okay, so is it this or this or this? I said, it's all of it. It's all of it in its own way. But yeah, and that's where it gets convoluted and confusing for both providers and patients. And that's why you have to become your own expert. And you have to understand that there are healthcare systems and even well-known licensed medical professionals and tax-funded health-centric agencies like the CDC, their stuff on fibromyalgia is so out of date. And they've even admitted it. And it's just like, can you update it, please? Like, we know this isn't correct. And it's misleading because that's what patients and providers use as a tool of guidance. And if it's not up to date, we are guiding them the wrong path, right? So that's why it's so important that you connect with people like thought leaders, those who have a research background, who have a medical background, advocacy. Like I do have a research background. I do have a lot of things, but I don't have all those things. I'm not an expert in everything. And that's when I reach out to people within my space who are. So an example would be functional medicine. I have a good knowledge about it, but definitely am not someone who should speak on the topic. And then I pull in those people to speak on the topic. And that's one of the things is that knowing those people or those entities to connect with or research. So as a patient, it's still going to be confusing, no matter how much you basically self-learn, but you'll have more knowledge, and knowledge is power because it helps you self-advocate in these appointments, whether it's a regular appointment or you have to go to the emergency room. that's kind of the power of the patient, is empowering yourself. And then what I do is put out information to help empower other patients, whether they have fibromyalgia or some other chronic condition.
And one of the things that came out of listening right now was actually two things came to my mind. The first one was that as a patient, it's important for us to notice the patterns, meaning if this, then that is quite common. I'll use, overdo that day or whatever, this type of symptom will happen. And I think that's helpful to take note of. I don't like to dwell on what's going on with me, but I found that my doctors appreciate that when I notice these patterns, that allows them to be able to get more clear on what's really going on my day-to-day life. But the part of that day-to-day that I wish people, including medical professionals, would understand, like the crazy pain scale, they say on a 0 to 10. And I'm like, according to who? Because I have a friend, a hangnail is a 10. And yet most people say, Sharon, you have amazing coping skills. And I'm like, I don't know, what's the alternative? I got to get up, I got to pay the bills.
I posed that question back to the provider. I said, are you asking me what my pain is on 1 to 10 based on what a normal person's experience is that doesn't live with chronic pain? Or are you asking me from a chronic pain perspective? Because my 5 is someone else's 8, 9, 10. And there's things that I've done, like I've injured myself or I've been sick before. I mean, like pneumonia or something else. But because of all my symptoms with my illness, initially I'll be like, oh, I'm going in a flare-up. I actually, 2016, the tendon on my lower arm, I don't, the word, they'll say tear, but it wasn't like it was torn. It basically kind of lifted off the bone. And I remember I was like, I couldn't even pick up my puppy. When it got to that point where I couldn't pick up my puppy with that arm, I was like, oh, something else is going on here. And it was bothering me for a while, like maybe 5 weeks, because my tolerance for pain is so high. And we learn with our chronic medical conditions to find chronic illness hacks to help us adapt around those kind of small hills that crop up on our symptom radar. And so sometimes, and like I said, I'm not perfect. Sometimes I will be like, feels like I'm going to go in a flare up, or I'll be like, I'm going to watch that for a while, or I'm going to watch this and see what happens. Because sometimes something obscure will happen, or a symptom will get really wonky out of nowhere. And then there's been times like immediately within a couple of days, it goes back down to its normal pain level for me, not a person that doesn't live with chronic pain. So that's one of the kind of catch-all with individuals such as ourselves, is that there's times where we kind of wait it out because we're like, is this a flare-up? And then when we get to a point where like, oh, this isn't a flare-up, like I better go get this checked out. It's just always like this juxtaposition of what you're going to do, and all this weird intersectionality between what our ability is to tolerate our symptoms. Is it fibro, or is it pneumonia, or did I hurt myself? And my pain levels are so high that my body really can't recognize I have an injury. So again, it goes back to self-education. And I love that you brought up, I call it SID. So I call it Symptom Identification Tracker, where you're tracking your symptoms. And I just tell people, you know what, if you can commit to 30 days, but 90 days is better, where you just date it, you rate the symptoms you're having, the level, and then like anything you did within, let's say 12 to 72 hours before. So a great example for me is irritable bowel syndrome. I have that. And there are certain things I know if I have it, my bowels are going to be irritable. So I know this. But when I first started that journey, I didn't. It was like everything. And now I know. And there's things that I know are going to cause my IBS to flare up, and I'm treating myself. I did that recently. My cousin is moving to San Diego, so we had dinner and stuff, and I had stuff that was delicious, but my IBS was like, oh no, and it flared up, and I lost a whole day and a half, but I knew it was going to happen, and I was prepared. Where years ago, I didn't know, because I wasn't tracking or creating a baseline, figuring out what my baseline was.
I think that's important to know about yourself, because oftentimes I get a lot of strange symptoms that come and go, and some of them can come and go, as I mentioned earlier, in a matter of minutes. And I used to think about, oh my goodness, I could be having something totally unrelated, like a heart attack, and ignoring some of the symptoms just because, oh, well, yeah, it's just another day of more fatigue than yesterday or whatever. And I think it's important to at least have some of those symptoms that are the most common for you, so when the symptoms outside of that box or could be outside of that box, and to really seek help. I've always thought about that. Oh, okay, when would I know when it's really time? I don't want to wait through the pain so long that then it becomes an absolute emergency.
Well, and that's very difficult. And you brought up heart attacks. So January 18th of 2023, I had a heart attack. And I don't fit the mold of who is identified as typically having a heart attack because I'm younger, I'm at a healthy weight. I am very conscious of what I put in my body. I try to eat organic, non-GMO, preservative-free, all that fun stuff. I'm kind of nerdy that way. But because of having fibromyalgia, and this will probably parlay into another point, is we develop a lot of other medical conditions as a result. And this is common with any chronic illness. So one common condition that people with fibromyalgia may develop is Raynaud's or Raynaud's syndrome. And it's this condition that affects your circulatory system, and it causes your blood vessels and arteries to spasm, twitch, or contract, including the ones in your heart. And lo and behold, I was having these symptoms that were very familiar, like, ooh, my fatigue is really bad this morning, and moving. I mean, literally, and I was sitting there playing it out in my head, contemplating, like, okay, is this like a fibro thing or something else going on? And it wasn't, the minute I started feeling nauseated and then I got sick, I was like, oh yeah, this isn't it. This is completely different response compared to things that are specific to fibromyalgia. And so I went to the emergency room, and lo and behold, the Raynaud's syndrome caused the artery in my heart to spasm, which constricted, and that constricts the blood flow, and I had a heart attack. But yeah, it's one of those, at first I was like, oh boy, I felt like I was trying to walk through sludge with cement blocks on my feet. But I felt that before in fibromyalgia flare-ups. So it's kind of like, again, that's why it's like, you got to be an educated patient, but you also got to be like, this ain't right. And it's always, when in doubt, get checked out. And that's what I did. And that's when they were like, oh, you had a heart attack. And I was like, well, that's fantastic. And I'm, obviously being facetious, but I was kind of like, let's add one more thing to the list where I don't even meet what is considered the typical criteria to have a heart attack. So yeah, and that's kind of also the danger of having invisible illnesses and all these multiple things going on inside your body. And doctors, they have a hard time too. And again, it goes back to being as self-educated as you can on how your body is for you and how it responds to things, but also understanding what your medical condition is, having a good understanding on that. And so when something is really not right, you're in a place where you can say, I know this isn't right. This isn't typical. There's something wrong. And that's where that self-empowerment, self-advocacy piece comes in, because to get there, you have to go through the gamut of learning and connecting with people and entities. They're going to help you be able to do that self-advocacy and figure out, is this something of the norm or is this not the norm?
It's
a fun game. Guess what symptom it is today. Guess what issue it is today. It's a fun game. And I'm sure, you can relate in your listeners. That's just kind of the life of chronic illnesses, especially those that are invisible illnesses.
Oh, absolutely. And with that, we need to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we'll talk more with Kristal about invisible illnesses. And there's a couple other topics I want to bring up to everyone. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The Autoimmune Hour will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by understandingautoimmune.com to learn more.
Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and I'm here with the amazing Kristal Kent. She's a patient advocate. She's a fibromyalgia warrior, as I like to say, as well as one of those who digs deep into all the research, and she is great at seeing patterns. And I love that she has such an open mind, and the question, what if, is really powerful. When I talk to her, I just notice that she's always asking, well, what if? And I love that about her. And by the way, May is Fibromyalgia Awareness Month. And so that's one of the reasons I said, hey, Kristal, come back on. We've been talking about that. We've been talking about symptoms and how I would say a large number of people with invisible illness, whether they're labeled autoimmune or not, have amazing skills, coping skills, pain threshold skills, other things like that, that are wonderful because they keep us moving. And then they have the darker side that they can keep us from maybe seeking treatment quick enough or being taken seriously, any number of things. So that was fantastic. I will have Kristal back to dive deeper into that, but I want to talk about some things about when someone says, okay, I really like the idea Kristal's talking about, the patient advocacy work that she does. What are some tips you have for somebody who says, I really want to take a stand here?
Advocacy is such a broad stroke. There's so many different things within both awareness and advocacy. And a lot of people will say awareness is not actionable, but that's not true. And I can give a couple examples. I don't agree with that. I think it is a stepping stone for advocacy, and you need awareness in order for advocacy to come to fruition. So the first thing is figuring out, a lot of people will come to me and say, I want to start advocating. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you interested in? It is such a huge space. There's room for everybody. In every little niche you could think of, we need someone, right? A good example of that would be men living with invisible illnesses, fibromyalgia in particular, or veterans. And that's a great space to be in because men as a whole, when it comes to quite a few invisible illnesses like lupus, MS, fibromyalgia, underrepresented. And I know for myself, I try to promote awareness as much as possible, but I don't speak on behalf of men per se. But what I do is I open my space to them and share it for them to share their stories. So the first thing I would say is, what is your niche? What are you interested in? And you would be surprised, some things would not seem to be advocacy, but I'm like, it can be, whatever you want it to be. So I have a lot of people that I know that are very artistic, and I'm all about the arts. I'm all about horse therapy. I'm all about dog therapy. And for anyone that follows me, they're like, yes, we know Kristal, she loves dogs. And I incorporate my dogs in those awareness and advocacy initiatives. They've been to awareness walks with me or veteran specific events. And I'll say art is a great thing, I said they use art therapy in different sectors of medical care where, like, when patients have cancer and they're getting chemo, or with children. And I'm like, art therapy is something that is so needed. And I've seen programs like at the VA where they've had, before COVID, they would have like art therapy groups. And I was like, why not then ask the veterans if they can have their artwork displayed on the walls of the VA facilities
What a great
as
idea.
the artwork. And then you save money on the administrative side and not have to buy artwork, because you had veterans who made artwork on your walls, and then that's fiscally responsible. And believe it or not, that is a form of advocacy. It's kind of soft advocacy, but that's the one thing looking at advocacy. You could take whatever you're passionate about. I say, what are your skill sets? What are you passionate about outside of being a patient and trying to fix the system? And let's look at it strategically and see all the little layers that you can start with. You know, you could write, if you are a creative writer, you could write a poetry book about living with a chronic illness. And that can become a staple for some people, like family members, friends, strangers, or even colleagues or medical providers, to have a better understanding. So a lot of people think advocacy. Yes, I do legislative advocacy. I do VA policy advocacy. I do systems advocacy, healthcare. I do a lot of, you know, the big ones, right? But there's so many other areas of advocacy that need to be filled. And whatever you're passionate about, I know people, I love dogs. A lot of people don't know I'm a licensed animal psychologist. I am a certified dog trainer and canine behavior modification specialist. And so I love dogs. And one of the things is dogs are incorporated in my awareness initiatives, in my advocacy initiatives, because most people, they like animals. It's also a way to get fibromyalgia or other issues impacting the fibromyalgia community or veteran community on people's radars who never would have paid attention. They just are like, oh, cute puppy dogs. And then they're like, oh, I just learned something. And it creates a trickle down effect. So that's why I say be creative. What are your skill sets? What do you like to do? And what can you do? Not everybody can take on those, what we call the big guns, you know, like the big, and that's okay. You don't need to.
You never know what's going to turn out. The show started 10 years ago in 2014, and here we are now with almost 500 episodes. And I just started a few shows to talk and learn more about my condition, and found out that there was a big need and interest in it. So like, oh, interesting. Just like you said, oh, cute puppy. So you never know. Now my friends call it my irrational passion, and I take that as a lovely badge of honor. It's like, here she is, keep on chugging, 10 years and 500 shows into it. So I think it's fantastic. It doesn't have to be that big goal out there. My goal was not to do this for 10 years. My goal was not to do it for continual, like 500 plus episodes. I intend to keep doing it because I love doing it now. And I get nice information back. Like, thank you, that was helpful. Thank you for bringing Kristal on the show. That was helpful. Thank you for bringing Sarah on the show. That was helpful. And that's nice to know that what you do is helpful.
And what your irrational passion was has become a platform of empowerment and showcasing advocates and giving people the information, even teaching them like how they can be in the space. And I'm telling you, I'm a huge supporter of optimizing social media for awareness and advocacy. Huge. And some people, they don't necessarily take it seriously until they see the momentum I have built on certain things, or getting legislative bills across, you know, the line. And I'm not saying I'm the driving force behind all of them. Sometimes it's like a cross collaboration. Other times, yes, it's myself and my team. But that's the other thing too, is you can actually do so much awareness and so much advocacy from the comfort of, you know, your bed, even if you're not feeling well, by utilizing social media, by sharing your story, by sharing some of the systemic barriers you contend with, by sharing ideas to alleviate some of those barriers, and cultivating that conversation. And you'd be surprised how many people will pay attention. A lot will who do not have the illness or may not understand what's going on. But I mean, over the years, for me, it's been 10 years. I started blogging under the Fibromyalgia Pain Chronicles in 2014. And then that parlayed into awareness pages on social media platforms. And will be, what year is it? 6 years in November 11th, which is Veterans Day, that I started Veteran Voices for Fibromyalgia, more advocacy and veteran and military specific supports and resources. But 10 years ago, when I was just blogging under this pen handle name, I had no idea, despite the fact that I had already decades of advocacy experience because I worked in mental health, I worked in the intellectual disability fields, human services. And I just if you would have asked me 10 years ago, would I have been where I am now? I would have said probably not. Here I am. So that's the whole thing, is even if it doesn't make sense to others, if it makes sense to you, in a lot of ways, we're compelled to do these things. And you would be surprised when you look back over your journey of promoting awareness and advocacy in your own way, how far you have come. And that is the moral of the story. You want to start an advocacy or promoting awareness, figure out what areas you want to focus on, figure out creative ways, and use your passion to engage in awareness and advocacy. And it doesn't have to be leaps and bounds. It can be just a couple of steps at a time.
It can be amazing steps at a time. I have a friend who's enjoyed doing art, and not art therapy, but just art, sort of doodling while they were in certain situations, care situations. And then they started making items out of it, like getting it printed onto tote bags and things like that. They started a little side hustle. I even find that advocacy, because people are like, oh, here's someone who, like, on the chart, probably a lot of people will be going, well, why are you doing that? Or you shouldn't be doing that, or something like that. And I just think it's wonderful that they're able to express themselves that way. So it doesn't have to be, as you said, I didn't start this to be world changing either, but I'm glad it's been well received and that people are enjoying the information we can bring.
And all those little things have a huge impact down the road. So it's like someone who's artistic making bags, there's the story behind it. This is the reason why I'm making the bags, right? So there's that. And then people know that, oh, wow. Right. And so I know so many people who are creative in my community, and so many other, play music, write songs, painting, drawing. I'm not really a painter. I mean, abstract would be my area of expertise if I was painting, but like words, I'm really good with the written word. And I have had published creative writings and short stories published in the past. But I see these people with so many artistic skills, and they create these items like little paintings or jewelry or just whatnot, what have you. And then they sell it, and they keep some of the proceeds. But then, like, each month, the items they sell is designated for a cause or a nonprofit. And I'm like, so that's something too, that maybe you don't want to engage in, like, serious, legislative advocacy. But if you have these talents and you're able to monetize them for yourself and then give back to a community, then you're helping. Every little penny helps that organizations or that advocacy initiatives. And so that makes you part of the process. That makes you part of the team. That makes you part of the building blocks that get us from A to Z, because it's a long process with advocacy. And that's the other thing, is that whatever you contribute is always enough, and it's always more than enough. So do whatever feels right for you in your own fun, creative way. I try to be fun and creative because what I do can be very boring. So to some people, I love it. I love solving problems and breaking all the systemic pieces down and going, okay, so if this plan doesn't work, let's come up with plan A, B, C, D. I always have a variety of plans in place for one issue, because if it doesn't work that way, it will probably work another way. So yes, advocacy can be confusing. It can be daunting, but it doesn't have to be. Pick out what you want to do and make it your own, and don't care what anyone has to say, because you'll be successful when you're passionate with the type of advocacy work you are involved in.
I think the passion really comes through, and that's the driving force. I was talking to a young woman today, and she was talking about something that she was wanting to do, and you could hear in her voice, even before she has started her, what somebody might label true advocacy journey, you could hear in her voice that it was, her whole demeanor changed, her voice pattern changed when she talked about this one thing that she feels she wants the world to know about, and she thinks it's important that people are aware of. And I was just like, you go. You're not alone. You go. This is great. You could hear passion in people's voice when they're talking about what they do and what they love. You can just, it's contagious to me when you're around people like that are passionate about what they do. It just seems to rub off on everybody around them.
It's an exchange of energy. So for me, I love it in so many ways. I love the challenges. I mean, I don't like the challenges, but I love the challenges because they teach me something or they make me think outside of the box and be innovative. I love it because of the outcomes that I see. And it's not right away. That's especially when you're dealing with policy advocacy, legislative advocacy. You can have a bill that's signed into law, but when it comes into effect and then when it really is full blown in effect, there's some time frame there. But the biggest thing at the end of the day for me is it gets me every single time though too, because people thank me all the time and it's such a weird space, and I'm like, why are you thanking me? Thank you for being here. Thanks for reading my post. Thanks for calling your congressional representative. Thanks for supporting me. And it's just a weird space. I struggle with imposter syndrome as well because of this. I just try to be me, and people can take me or leave me. It doesn't matter. But what I can say is at the end of the day, or even end of the year, or at the end of a decade, there will be that one person, but there'll be more. When you see what you do becomes transformative for someone else, that at the end of the day, no words. There is no words. There's no words to describe like the beautiful graciousness of someone being vulnerable and you've assisted them or supported them some way. And they brought you into that space and you see a shift in them. And it's so indescribable, but it's so gloriously beautiful to see those shifts in people simply because you're sharing your own story or you're sharing, like I share and give updates every so often, not as often as I should, of the advocacy initiatives. I just put out one thus far in 2024, what Veteran Voices has been working on, Veteran Voices for Fibromyalgia. All that stuff, it sounds really kind of nerdy and awesome and like, whoa, that's like big time, heavy hitting. And at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I want these bills passed. Yeah, I want this policy changed or amended. But the most important thing is the person. And that's why I do it. Because if you're not really focusing on the outcomes and the impact it has on people, for me, why are you doing it? Like, why are you there? And like I said, there's no way. I'm a very articulate, descriptive person. I cannot describe what it's like to be able to observe and witness someone you've supported, or even someone who has followed me, or someone that has decided to get into some awareness and advocacy, and just see that shift. And I'm not saying for the better, but it's like the light is different with that person. There's no words. So at the end of the day, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that legislative bill passed that I was supporting or called 200 Congress members on. And then I see this one person whose mentality has changed, who has been brave and shared their raw story and vulnerable. And then I see other people responding to them. That at the end of the day is the most valuable, beautiful thing to be a part of. Be a part of. Yeah. I'm not of it, but they allowed me the grace to open up to me or to follow me or to reach out to me. And then I have the privilege of being in their space for just a little bit and being able to witness that. And that's why I do it, because it's amazing.
I agree with you. The feeling when someone says something, well, thank you for that show. It really helped me, or it changed the way I view something, or something like that. I'm, well, thank you. It's indescribable when the people are saying, and then you go to yourself, oh, well, I'm glad I was able to be part of a change, part of an awareness, part of something. I'm driven by curiosity in my life. I just am so curious. And so I love to put things together where, oh, well, if you did this and you did that, why haven't people done that before? Because it's obvious you would get something, this other thing over here. And I just think that's fantastic. And I agree with you that it's indescribable when you realize that just even what you might consider one small thing was able to change someone's life in a really positive way. It's really wonderful to know that they are going to be able to have a change of their life that's important to them, and them able to walk in a different way. And that's really important. And as most people know, Kristal and I can talk forever. We're down to the last few minutes. You brought up one comment a little bit in passing that I'd like to circle back on, because I think it's often misunderstood. And that was about men. I often hear fibro and or autoimmune being a woman's disease, and I know that's not true. And I feel like men should be better represented in this, because they are different. They're going to have different experiences and different life experiences with it. Can you talk a little bit about that fibro and autoimmune aren't women's diseases?
Well, specifically like with fibromyalgia, we often read, hear, see on social media, even though it's well-intended, people are promoting awareness or sharing information, but it's misdirected information where it's a woman's illness. That's just statistically not true. There's actually been research done that's published, on the CDC website, is published through the National Institutes of Health, looking at the prevalence of men suffering with fibromyalgia within the community as a whole. And a couple of research studies found that they were peer-reviewed and whatnot, found that approximately 40% of fibromyalgia sufferers are men. And one of the researchers, off the top of my head, I can't recall his name, but him and his team also hypothesized that they thought it might even be a little bit higher due to men underreporting or not reporting the diagnosis or being misdiagnosed with something else. And they hypothesized that it could be closer to 50%. Until more specific research is done on that, all I can say is about 40%. But what I see is this constant narrative in medical settings, doctors' offices, on social media, that it's a woman's illness. And then I also see like fellow advocates and awareness pages and bloggers perpetuating this falsehood. And then what happens is we alienate a huge portion of the community, and they're not being represented. And so myself, interestingly, when I'm just in a fibromyalgia specific space, yes, there's a lot of women there. But then if I'm in the veteran space, guess what? I'm the minority, because there's only about 2 million women veterans in the United States as a whole. And when I'm looking at the community of fibromyalgia and looking at military, DoD contractors and veterans, there's way more men in those spaces. And, that's more of a population ratio thing. But what I do is, yes, I will share the information about how it afflicts men, the research, the percentage, but I also open my space up so that men can speak their truth, share their story, discuss the inequities they contend with being a man living with fibromyalgia or another invisible illness. Another thing is that we see about 30% of people with lupus are also diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So I've opened my platforms to have both men and women with lupus that are diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And that's the whole thing about representation. It's important to share the correct information so that everybody within a particular community is being recognized. But representation is where you're including them in those conversations. And there's not enough of that going on, not just with the fibromyalgia community, but a lot of communities. And so my whole thing is, no, I want you to share your story. I want you to share your experience. We need to really break these misnomer stigmas and stereotypes that are absolutely not true. And the only way we can do that is to put a face to it. And so that's when I do a lot of interviews, or I've created little small like clips of informational videos that are representative. And one of the things with fibromyalgia that I've done over the years is every so often I'll put together kind of like a team video, whether it's sharing information about fibromyalgia or sharing our experience. And one of the things is I always have 40% of the participants in any particular like awareness video are men. I also have people, they say fibromyalgia, an identified risk factor that runs in your families. So I include people that have multiple generations of individuals in their family with fibromyalgia. Research stats on children, they're not really out there. We're seeing more about juvenile fibromyalgia, but not the prevalence amongst children and teens and young adults. But what research is out there, I try to represent them as well in some of the awareness videos I've done in the past, where I've had someone or two someones under the age of 18 who have participated in the videos. We're not just talking about the numbers, you're seeing the numbers. And you're seeing, you know, the representation of, 40, like to 45% of the participants on this project or in this awareness video were in fact men. And so that is the other thing, is you need to make sure that we are putting out correct information, because while we mean well, we could be inadvertently, unknowingly creating more harm by perpetuating false narratives about who has fibromyalgia or any other chronic illness for that matter. And we have to be cognizant, and we have to share our platforms with everybody within our community. So yes, put out information, create photo memes, write a blog, do a video, write an article, but why not invite a guest blogger on your site who is representative of a subgroup within your group, or do a live video chat or pre-recorded or podcast when that would have you. So yes, I'm really, really huge on representation, not just with men and, you know, people of color, representing people from other countries, Native American or First Nation people, because I am a descendant of Sioux and Lakota. And while I don't ever claim it, I know about some of their inequities and barriers they face. So I try to open my platforms as much as possible to them as well. And because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about our community. So in order for it to be about the community, my space is open for anyone in the community to share it with me at any point they feel comfortable to.
That's what I love about you, your passion for all of this and your projects that you have. I wanted to, we're just out of time, but share with us where we can find your platforms, and I like the Fibromyalgia Pain Chronicles on YouTube, things like that. Share with us where we can find some of this great information you and your team put out.
Sure. So the one-stop shop, as I like to call it, or one place hub, is my website, www.veteran Voices for Fibromyalgia. And you can find social media links there. But you can find me under my pen handle name, the Fibromyalgia Pain Chronicles, on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. I'm on TikTok, keeping it real at Kristal. And then Veteran Voices for Fibromyalgia, the website. I'm on Facebook and YouTube with that as well. And there's some intersectionality between the two. So if you're following the Fibromyalgia Pain Chronicles on one hub, you'll see some veteran stuff. And if you're following me at Veteran Voices for Fibromyalgia, let's say on Facebook, you're going to see some stuff from the Fibromyalgia Pain Chronicles. So pick one and you'll find me.
Or pick both. So show your support with a follow and a like and a clap and a heart here and there. And thank you so much, Kristal. Thank you for sharing the time. It's always good to see you and to hear all of your wisdom and share how important it is to advocate in our own way and to choose your space and make it yours, just like you have with the veterans. So everyone, that's Kristal Kent. Check her out because she has amazing information. And I love a lot of the short videos she did a while ago We're just about out of time, but I want to talk about, are the ones that you did where the real short ones with the people talking about invisible illness still available?
Yeah, they're on my social media platforms and YouTube. And so, yeah, those are available. There's fibromyalgia awareness because it matters. There's chronic illness awareness because it matters. Chronic pain awareness because it matters. There's the Team Fibro informational series and the Team Fibro fun awareness. That one's a fun video. So they're on YouTube and Facebook and some on Instagram and a couple on TikTok. I manage all the sites on my own. So when I get to it, I get to it, but it's there. And once it's there forever. So, and the pets video and the Pause for Fibro video as well came out this year. So we had a bunch of people with fibromyalgia sent me their photos of their pets that support them. And I put little video clips, and we had cats, dogs, birds, horses. So Pause for Fibro and Pets for Fibro is out there now too.
Fantastic. So everyone be sure and support Kristal and all of her team any way you can. And join me next week for another brand new episode. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.